Is it 100 megapixels yet? No, it's still 61 megapixels, but before you say, okay, thanks, bye, and close this video, just look at this. Do I have your attention now? There's actually a lot more going for this camera than just a new screen, but because it's using the same sensor as the A7R4, it's easy to think of the A7R5 as just a routine refresh from the R4. In reality, this is really more of a complete overhaul. It's a tremendous upgrade from the R4 in terms of shooting experience. I mean, finally, in the Mark V, the 7R series gets a Bion's XR processor. If you have used any of the recent alpha cameras at all, you would know just how big of a difference there is in responsiveness compared to cameras still running the old Bion's X, just like the A7R4. So, with the most capable chipset to date, Sony's taking a similar approach as they have did with the A7 Mark IV. They've taken all the best features from all the latest cameras, pack them all in here, then throw in a few more truly new features. We'll start with the hardware design. It follows the mold of the A7 Mark IV, so you get your stills and movie selector ring beneath the mode dial, and what was previously the EV dial is now a lockable, free-spinning secondary rear dial. Full-sized HDMI port, but this does get a flash sync port, which has always been exclusive to the R models on the A7 series. But of course, the most glaringly obvious hardware advancement here is the new LCD screen. It is now the best of both worlds. It is a flip-up screen, which can also flip out. Have your cake and eat it too. We've seen this design before on cameras like the Panny S1H, but it's the first time we're seeing it on a Sony. And by far, this is the most robust build of the flip up and out screen I've seen. The hinges feel very solid, reinforced, and have next to no wobble. Very much inspires confidence in terms of durability, but it does require a bit of muscle memory retraining, specifically for the flip up action. You have to be quite conscious to initiate the flip up from the left edge instead of the middle area, which will kind of mess things up. Also, when you look at one of these in person, if the screen looks extra good to your eyes, it's not a placebo effect of looking at the latest Sony camera. The screen is actually bigger. It's still the same height, but it's slightly wider, so it's now a true 3x2 display. You can now see a bigger preview of your photos utilizing every corner of that display. One trade-off though is your exposure settings will now be displayed over your preview as opposed to just outside your frame, which is why, by default, the Mark V ships with a new setting enabled for the text to hide itself after a timeout. In the EVF, however, most of your settings will still be displayed outside of your frame. Also, Sony says this panel is now a wide gamut P3 display, so plenty of upgrades in the screen department, but what about the pictures? Now, here's something interesting. Despite having the same sensor as the A7R4, Sony is claiming better image quality due to redesigned processing algorithms made possible by the more powerful processor. Regretfully, I do not have an A7R4 on hand to do side-by-side tests to see how much better it's gotten, but judging by its standalone performance, I've got zero complaints about image quality. This is still the highest resolution full-frame sensor currently available. With 61 megapixels, it means even if you were to shoot in the APS-C crop mode, you would still get 26.2 megapixel images. With that amount of image data, the dual card slots can now take CF Express Type A cards as well as SD cards, but the faster Type A media would also mean more sustainable continuous shooting. This can do 10 FPS in continuous high shooting, and for the most demanding recording option, which is uncompressed RAW plus JPEG, you can do 88 shots before the buffer tops out with a Type A card. If you're shooting only uncompressed RAW images, you have a buffer of 135 shots and 583 shots for compressed RAW only. There is a brand new feature introduced on this camera which I think many photographers who cover events would appreciate. You have the ability to dial in a separate set of exposure parameters which the camera will automatically use depending on whether a flash is being triggered. It's called Register Flash Shooting Settings, meaning you can define a range of shutter speeds and a fixed ISO to be used only for flashed shots. It's only available with compatible Sony flashes, but it's super convenient if you have to alternate between exposing for flashed and non-flashed photos. Note that if you are in M mode or shutter priority mode, your shutter speed will not get overridden by this function. One more new and neat feature for stills is a built-in focus bracketing mode. pretty niche but crucial feature for those who need it. You can bracket up to 299 shots automatically. And now we're getting to the main course, the single biggest upgrade for the A7R5. In fact, I think this may very well set the paradigm for autofocus in alpha cameras moving forward, and that is real-time subject recognition powered by artificial intelligence. Now, Sony is marketing this camera as having a dedicated AI processing unit, and what that means for autofocus performance is better tracking capabilities and being able to track a wider range of subjects. The improvements are very noticeable. It works very well even when the subject is facing away from the camera. It does a pretty impressive job at guessing where the eyes are, and even when the subject's wearing a mask, it knows it's looking at a human face and locks onto the eyes. Same goes for animal subjects. Even in tricky backlit situations, it tries to estimate the position of my cat's eyes, and even when my cat refuses to look at me, which happens way too often, the A7R5 still knows it's looking at my cat. All those years of training captures has also paid off in the form of additional subject recognition options. There's new insect, car/train, and airplane recognition modes. I wonder when we'll see a fire hydrant mode. But there's also a combined animal and bird mode in addition to their standalone modes. So it's up to the user's preference, I guess, whether or not they want to consider birds as animals. It is oddly specific though, like in the animal plus bird mode, you can still prioritize either birds or animals, sans birds. Also, all these AF tracking capabilities carry over into video mode as well. I know the A7R line has never really been video-centric, but this has quite a lot going for it in the video department. In essence, this is a 10-bit 8K machine. Now, depending on what resolution you're shooting at, the codecs, frame rates, and frame sizes will vary, so I'm just going to summarize them here on the screen. Otherwise, this will turn into a user manual read-through session. The footage out of the A7R5 is beautiful, however, there is one limiting factor that still puts this, first and foremost, as a stills camera. You've probably guessed it, rolling shutter is quite prominent. I believe this should come as a surprise to no one, considering the sensor sits at the cutting edge in terms of resolution. That being said, if you're primarily a stills shooter and need to roll some clips occasionally, this is capable of delivering spectacular results. It even gets that dedicated movie menu, just like the new firmware on the FX3, but if you're looking for Sony EI in here, I mean, this is an A7R. The A7R5 also marks a new peak for IBIS performance in Sony cameras. The IBIS in here is rated for 8 stops of stabilization. Pretty much every other recent alpha camera has been 5.5 stops, so this is noticeably better. Very welcome indeed for both stills and video. To close this video off, I'll go through a few honorable mentions for some neat features you'll be pleased to find on the A7R5. Neat features like being able to swipe up from the bottom of the screen to bring up the function menu, the variable shutter feature for flicker suppression, which means this now joins the rare list of alpha cameras that actually have this feature, namely the A1, A7 Mark IV, and the A9 Mark II. This also gets the feature to insert a divider frame, something we first saw on the A7 Mark IV. And finally, this is UVC compatible, meaning you can use this as a plug-and-play webcam. So this has been the Sony Alpha A7R Mark V. If you enjoyed this video or found it informative, why not watch another one of mine?